Hi, everyone. This is Brian with MEA and Friends, back with a new series of Where Are They Now with my co-host, Elias, as always. How you doing, Elias?
What's happening?
Oh, just, doing the day to day.
Doing a great job.
You tell me that a lot, so I tend to believe it.
Depending which day of the week it is, it's either motivational or actual, so.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's definitely a Monday. It's been a busy long weekend. So guys, we have a new series for Where Are They Now that we're starting. This one is called The Industry Icons. And this is something Elias and I have talked about for a few months that we've been really excited and working on. So with Where Are They Now, it's always been industry award finalists, and we love talking to all of those people. But we had an idea to be able to bring some of the other people in our industry who we wouldn't normally get to talk to in that facet. So this is going to be more about the people who have had an impact on our industry in ways that some people may not even know. This isn't just for us. This is for everybody. This is what they have done to pave roads that without them, we would not be the industry we are.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
it's one of those things where, and we've all spoken about so many influencers and motivators and people that have in one way or another laid the foundation for our industry. And, everyone that's helped us get to this point in one way or another, we've been fortunate to, have them push us, make us better, have us grow, and probably more than once. And we probably may or may not have realized it. And that's the beauty of, what our industry is, because we have so many people from, start to finish to now to, moving forward to, it's just great to have that influence and be able to share those stories and memories and, talk about these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think some of the people that we get to talk to in this facet, some of us will know and some of us won't have ever even heard of their name, but it's almost like a semi behind the scenes kind of situation where what they've done or who they impacted to create something else is definitely what's the word? Life-changing for our industry. Not just 100%. One person, but for the whole industry.
100%.
So on that,
about our first guest, almost unanimously.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. For me, when I got started in the industry out in Arizona, there used to be a car audio school called Mobile Dynamics. And I got to interact with this individual, learn, along with a lot of, peers. Fast forward to now, it's almost 20 years. So it's great to, this is exciting for me to say the least, long and short,
right. Yeah. I like I said, some of us have interacted and been touched by what this guy has given us or given the industry in so many ways. And, I mentioned earlier, getting ready to do this, I've got butterflies in my stomach for this one. This has been somebody who has, for my career, being that I started so far back, things that we learned from him and interactions that I've had have definitely changed the way I did things and looked at things. So I'm super excited to be able to chat with him and have him tell us a little bit of his story. So on that note,
let's do it.
Let's bring him in. Mark.
Good morning.
For those of you guys who don't know, This is Mark Lowe, formerly of Rockford Fosgate. And as Elias mentioned, he did a stint at Mobile Dynamics as well for a short time. But most of you guys will know him from Rockford Fosgate or have heard of him from Rockford Fosgate. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Honor that you guys reached out to me. I'm really looking forward to this. And like I said, it's just feel super blessed that I even came up on the list.
Well, Elias and I have talked about several people that we, just come up with off the top of our head names, because we'll do this like when we first started this Where Are They Now series, and it was for industry award finalists. I told him we'll come up with 5 people in each of the categories that we want to talk to. Like, let's just off the top of our head, 5 people, because 5 people in those categories just like that, right? When we did this one, I think 5 was a little tougher for both of us, but 3 was easy, and you were number 1 for both of us.
Well, that's
so
amazing to hear.
Yeah. So I go back, and Elias and I were on the phone the other day while I was digging for it. The first time we met was in 1994. And I think it was April or May, but I was at Top Gun. I have the book somewhere. I still have it, along with my JL Audio giant binder and a Phoenix Gold book and Orion 678 and stuff like that. They're around. I just, for whatever reason, I recently moved, and so some of that stuff's still in boxes somewhere, and I just wasn't able to locate it. But I was hoping to have it and be like, look, but wasn't able to get there. But that was my very first experience meeting you and learning from you. I know Elias has his time as well. So you recently retired from Rockford. I think when we were talking, it was about 6 years ago, right?
Yep. Almost exactly 6 years ago.
Almost exactly 6 years ago.
Yeah. Last month.
Wow. Okay. So just over 6 years. That's amazing.
Yep.
How long were you with Rockford?
I started there in 1990, so it was 28 years. So
wow.
Pretty good stint. Like Elias said, I was at Mobile Dynamics for a little while, about 18 months in that time frame. Okay. In between, I was at Rockford for, 15 years, a year and a half at Mobile Dynamics, and then back to Rockford.
Okay. 1990. I graduated in 1990. So now I don't have to feel so old next to Elias.
Exactly.
Like we joked when we talked to Jeff Smith last year, the joke was that he'd been installing since dinosaurs were around, and I'm like, wait, I'm older than Jeff. I've been in it longer than Jeff. But so what do you do now?
Enjoying life. Since I retired, it's just everything's on my terms. So it's amazing and super blessed that I'm in the position I am. And, it's been amazing to be able to do some stuff in my life that I wasn't able to do before. And just, still have, woodworking type hobbies and still do stuff like that. And it's been a great run.
Excellent. It's fun. Can't wait till the day that I can just sit back and play with my guitars and do woodworking projects just because I feel like it. That'll be a nice day. Elias, you can go on and grow old from there, youngster.
Well, you said 1990, so I was 3 years old.
Exactly.
Thanks.
I appreciate that comment.
Thanks, pal.
Had to do it.
So Mark, I got a question for you, and we mentioned this. So, Top Gun was this training program for the guys that don't know. It was a training program that you went to Rockford for, and it was like fabrication and install stuff, mostly fabrication related that I remember it being. But what brought about the idea of Top Gun? Because as I understood it, RTTI started before Top Gun, right?
That is correct. So RTTI, which was the brainchild of Ron Trout, which was a guy that I super looked up to and still do, but
absolutely.
He really carved the path for the training at the, manufacturer training. RTTI was the first people to do anything like that. And, that was one cool thing with Rockford is they invested early, into making sure that their dealers were the best educated and trained dealers out there. And Ron started that and, really carved the path for that. So I went to RTTI back in, I think it was 1988. And I think Ron started it maybe in 86, I believe was the year.
Okay.
86 or 87. So when I was at a retail shop in Tucson called The Specialists, and
I know them.
Around,
yeah.
And they were a big Rockford dealer back in the day. And I was, lucky enough to go to one of Ron's classes. And I remember going and just thinking, oh my God, I know nothing. And, learned so much at that class, from Ron and just from the other students. And I just remember thinking, God, I was so impressed with Ron and just, and he had some of his demo cars there. And I just thought, that's where I want to be. I want to get to that level. So I guess fast forward to that, from that point, I had built some pretty good cars when I was down in Tucson, and that was back in, even before Iasca, the NACA days.
Yeah.
So, I got to know a lot of the guys at Rockford, Ron and, a lot of the sales guys and people like that.
Okay.
And I had the opportunity, they had reached out to me to fabricate their demo vans. So we built 16 Astro vans. They were called Blastro vans.
I remember those.
One for each rep firm across the U.S.
Yeah.
And then one for Rockford that was used at the CES show.
Okay.
So going through that project with Rockford, I really got to know a lot of the guys, internally, because, worked with so many people there. And there was a gentleman who might have been Eastern Regional or one of the regionals named Jerry Cave. And Jerry and I just kind of hit it off from the beginning. And he always had such a great personality, and he was always so excited to see what was going on, when he would come down to the shop, and, he always had good ideas. And so I just formed a pretty good relationship with Jerry. So after we completed those vans, Jerry had reached out and was trying to get me to come up to Rockford, but there was no set thing. It's just like, we want to get, do something in training with you. And I was like, I don't know if that's what I really want to do. I love my gig at the Specialists. The owner there, Charlie Weisel, he really took care of me. And, we had a great thing going there. Tucson, some people realize and some people don't. And that was really one of the early areas in the country that built some of the best cars. There was, just a lot of really good shops there. And, that was the original shop down there, built the Z boxes. And, only anyone who's really old would even know what Z-Box was. But they were the first custom fiberglass door pod or stealth box type. They pioneered those before anybody. And so being at a competitor in town, it was hard to compete with that level. They were so far ahead of their time. The only mistake Z-Box really made, the name of that shop was Classic Car Sounds. The owner of that was John and Jelly. So really the only thing they made a mistake on, in my opinion, was they only targeted the exotic cars. So if you had a Ferrari or a Mercedes or Porsche or whatever, they had Z-Boxes for those cars.
Okay.
And the other mistake, looking back at it from my, installation background, was they kept everything a secret. Their installers only knew really how to install Z-Boxes. They didn't know how to fabricate a Z-Box. So they kept that away in a special, studio shop where only the guys involved in that knew that process.
Oh, wow.
So that's really what we had to compete against. So in the early days, that's really how I became known. Was we came up with different ways of building a Z-Box. I mean, we basically knocked off the concept with the press-in cloth grill, the whole thing like that. But we came up with ways of, building them for any car.
Okay.
Because a lot of the customers that we had in Tucson, since it's 70 miles from the border of Mexico, it was a different clientele. And, we had a lot of, I would refer to them as recreational pharmacists.
Street pharmacy.
That's spent a lot of money on car audio.
Yeah.
And for, me at the time, it was awesome because the amount of cars that came through the shop, there were, every day we had cars that were getting custom door boxes, custom enclosures. And, a lot of it was because of that. So instead of seeing a car once a month or every few weeks, we were doing cars every single day. So our learning curve, was accelerated. What we did in a year were what, some people saw in a few, that amount of cars, they would be lucky to see a few, and where we would see them every week.
Right.
So because of that, and, the owner down there, Charlie, is, he allowed us to experiment, and, he supported buying tools and those types of things. And, if I really look back at, that phase of my career, without the specialist and Charlie Weisel, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, because he really was the guy that allowed me to play with, and come up with ideas and stuff. So
nice.
So basically, we built those vans. So that was kind of a twist on that, on your question. But we built those vans, and I got to know Jerry, and Jerry had tried to recruit me up. And, like I said, I was so happy at the specialist. I mean, it was like a dream come true. Because prior to that, I'll back up again just one more time. I started in car audio in Casper, Wyoming, which is a small town in Wyoming. I was into car audio when I was in high school. In fact, I was the first person in Wyoming to have a CD player, an in-dash CD player.
Oh, wow.
So, and that would have been 1983. So I had a Trans Am, and I was just into car audio. And anyway, so I worked at a couple shops there, and there's when I really say about people who influenced me from an early, from the beginning, the first shop I ever worked at was a place called Harmony Car Stereo. and there was a guy there named Vern Miller. And I used to go in there as a 16-year-old and drive him crazy, I'm sure, looking back on it, asking him a million questions. And I had, $3 in my pocket or something. I didn't have any money to buy anything.
Right.
But, we always, somehow I always figured out how to get money to buy car audio. So he ended up hiring me for an after-school job in high school. And, really without that opportunity, I don't know if I would have ever even got into car audio to begin with. So my professional career started in 83, early 84, somewhere in there. So that was super cool to learn from him. And, so I was there, moved to Tucson, did the specialist gig, got to know Jerry Cave. So now we're back to the original question. So Jerry tried to recruit me. And at first, like I said, I wasn't interested in it. And then he came to me one day and said, "Hey, I have this idea. We want to do a twist on RTTI." Well, that got my interest because, looking up to Ron, I'm like, oh, if it's something with RTTI, I would love to be part of that. And by that point, Ron was less involved in RTTI. There were some other guys there. Bart Deal was actually running the RTTI program at that point. So Jerry said he had this concept of he wanted to do a program called Top Gun. He didn't really know what Top Gun was, in his mind, other than it was an elite program for only the best of the best. So he brought me, I came up to Phoenix or came up to Tempe and met with him. And he told me that, kind of the concept. And the idea was it was invitation only. It was limited at 12 students per class. And, basically you had to get invited to it. We did one a month. Mm-hmm. And after he, kind of pitched that to me, I'm like, that sounds amazing. That sounds like we're, a career path that I would like to be on. So in 1990, I moved from Tucson up to Phoenix, up to Tempe. And we, first thing I did is went in and we rebuilt the shop and kind of got it relayed out. And I started there in August of 90. And we had our first Top Gun, I believe it was in February of 91.
Wow.
So, I remember those early conversations with Jerry. And then once I actually started there, thinking, holy shit, what did I get myself into? Just thinking that, I was a good installer, but there are a lot of great installers. Was I the best of the, was I that guy? I'm like, I don't know. That's a lot of shoes to fill there. So, basically, I had to come up with what the program was. And for me, it was, first of all, it was kind of scary thinking that, we're going to bring in 12 of the best guys. So in my mind, I'm like, where do I even line up with these 12 guys each month? There's a lot of good guys out there. And so Top Gun, my direction on it was, hey, we're going to have 12 of the best guys at one time. What can we do to make them better? So I tried to look at different angles of what we could do to improve them. And really my number one thing was, and it's true today, and it was really true back then, is everyone wanted to do high-end car audio, but nobody was making any money at it because everything took too long. So my approach to I tried to sit back and just dissect door box or, a custom pod. What can we do to make that process faster?
Yeah.
So instead of approaching, trying to do some exotic fiberglass, or whatever type project, it was more, how can we dissect what they're already doing, but make them do it faster and make more money? Because, part of it was for Rockford, let's be honest, it was about selling more product.
Sure.
Rockford, they put a lot of money into that program, but ultimately it was really to sell more product and to make sure that their dealers were the best educated dealers out there. So Top Gun was, somewhat of a slippery step there, because we had to teach something that not only was exciting for the installers, but had to be exciting for the owners of those stores. So if all we taught was something really cool, but they'd work on a car for a month, that's not what the owners wanted. The owners wanted high-end car audio that could be done more on a production type basis.
More profitable.
So, more profitable. So, we had to kind of address, the installer and the owner at the same time.
Sure.
So that's really where it all came from. So when I looked at, when I was in Tucson at the Specialists, we built a lot of door boxes, custom pods, kick panels or door panels. But everything around that was, you always had to have a ring, a grill ring that the speakers sat in, and a grill. Back then everything was just a cloth grill for the most part that pushed into that custom shape. So when I really looked at, what was involved in building those, the ring that the grill went into, that was the most time consuming part of that fabrication, because everything was done with a jigsaw. And, some people are better with jigsaws than others, but getting a left and right grill to match and to fit in after vinyl, after grill cloth, that was the most time consuming part. So really my focus for that first 6 months at Rockford was, how do we figure out a different way of doing that? And that's really where the whole router and flush trim bit started. That was the beginning, because there was no that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there were some, but routers were not really being used.
No.
Maybe with a circle guide to cut a hole, maybe to do a round over or a chamfer or something, but for duplication in car audio, that didn't exist. So that's really where the Top Gun in the early days focused, was on how to speed that up. So, Brian, you mentioned your original Top Gun manual, that went back to, basically how to flush trim something, how to make one original piece, one shape, a positive, and reduce it with a rabbet bit to turn that into a negative, so that you could have a grill that fit inside, so you could have a positive and negative piece. So, that's was really the core behind Top Gun in the early days, was the router. And It's kind of ironic to look at today, and I still follow the car audio scene, to a certain degree. And obviously I still see a lot of router stuff going on, 35 years later.
Right.
So,
yeah, I don't think you'll ever get away from it, because there's, we kind of refer to it now. One of the guys that I really admire in the industry, his name is Justin Marks. He refers to it as analog versus digital. So CNC and laser and everything, it's all digitally controlled, but you still have to know how to do analog using a router table and hand routers and all of that. And something that if you're really good at, you'll never get away from.
Yep. No, most definitely. And, you know, in the early days, like I said, that Top Gun, it had to appeal to the installer, but had to appeal to the owner. So one thing we were really cautious about was we had to figure out ways to do these techniques that weren't going to cost the owner of the store a bunch of money.
Sure.
Because if we sent the installer back in, you know, in those days, if we would have said, oh, you have to buy CNC, which, you know, really didn't exist at that consumer level at that point.
No.
You know, the owners would be like, I'm not sending anybody else to this Top Gun program because all it's going to do is cost me money. And, you know, make installers think that they needed all this stuff. So we really, in the early days of that program, tried to tailor it to where, you know, all you need is a router. You can mount it to a piece of wood and put it on top of a trash can. And that can be,
I remember that. I remember going back and I went to Home Depot or wherever it was, and I bought a trash can, like a big gray trash can. And I took a piece of MDF and I figured out, you know, how big to make it. And I put my router, I screwed the base of my router to the wood, and then took a hole saw marked it, took a hole saw and cut the hole, and then screwed the base on, and just, you would move it up and down from underneath. It didn't have a lift, but you would just have to plunge, you know, get it all set where you wanted it, which sometimes was a pain in the butt. But God, I remember those days. That was funny. The guys at the shop I was at, they're like, what the heck are you doing? Watch.
Yeah. Well, because a router lift didn't even exist.
Yeah, no.
So that was really, I mean, kind of the, you know, the core behind Top Gun was the router was definitely the focus. But everything involved with that, you know, I think we taught, you know, a lot of people, you know, back in the early 90s, everything was carpet. There was not a lot of vinyl going on.
No.
So I think, you know, we definitely pioneered a lot of the upholstery techniques with stretching vinyl and those types of things in the early days.
Yeah. And then the tweed era.
And the tweed.
And the splatter paint.
Yep.
Oh, Flexstone and splatter paint. Yep. Yep.
So I'm gonna ask a question that I was gonna ask later, but you guys brought it up, so I'm laughing. Mark, if you were challenged to a jigsaw challenge, do you still got it?
I'm still pretty good with a jigsaw, but I had a mission since 1990 to be jigsaw free.
Yeah.
And that the jigsaw, you know, really what I taught and believe is the jigsaw was a rough cutting device only.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we used to do a jigsaw challenge at Rockford, but it was a little bit different because we had a lot of guys, you know, bringing those guys in, you know, you have to imagine, because back, you know, another thing I would say that Rockford and, you know, I think with my help contributed to the industry is everything was a secret. No one wanted to share their tricks.
Yeah.
You know, we would get 12 guys in there and no one would share, oh, this is how I do this, or this is how I do that. And that was really what, you know, I preached from the beginning is we can all be better if we help each other. You know, we're all in different areas, you know, of the country. And really the goal is to build the industry where, you know, for me in the beginning, I built some, you know, good cars and, but my goal was never, you know, especially once I went to Rockford, it wasn't about me. It was about the industry. You know, I by default became known, but it wasn't because I was trying to be known. I was more about educating the industry and supporting Rockford. You know, it wasn't about Mark Lowe. You know, I look back, you know, I was more of a coach and I was trying to build the best car audio team out there and have all these great players across the US and across the world. And, that was really my goal. And, what I preached a lot was, hey, we used to refer to it as, there was no magic. We're going to open the book and show you everything. We have no secrets. And for a lot of installers back then, they didn't agree with that. Everyone was kept their tricks to themselves. So, Elias, to your question about the jigsaw, so we would do the Top Gun, and we'd have a lot of doubters, especially that first day. We'd have a lot of attitude coming into that building the first day. Especially since it was invitation only. You had 12 of the best guys, and they all believed they were 12 of the best guys, as they should. And probably a vast majority of them at different classes were better than I was. But I was maybe smarter in different ways and given the opportunity by Rockford to do things differently. So when we would start talking about the router, every class, it didn't matter for the first few years, the guys would be like, I can cut that faster with a jigsaw. So that was the jigsaw challenge is, okay, so you can cut 2 grills with a jigsaw faster than we can router them. And you would be amazed how many students in that class would be, 100%. There's no way that you can do it faster on the router. So that was our jigsaw challenge. So
I like that. Faster on the router.
I remember those. And you talk about, before routers and how we used to do this. I remember the whole thing of you would cut the outer ring and then you cut the inner ring and you make it, you're making it smaller. So I remember the days of you draw your circle for your outer ring of the speaker pod, and then you take the next piece of wood and you make the thing smaller. And you didn't, like nowadays, Elias, you see where like everything we do, it's all perfectly fit. Well, you would take carpet and wrap that, but that intersection, you didn't glue the carpet down. You would take your ring for your speaker grill. You would, put the grill cloth around it, staple it on the back, right? Like you would. And then you press it in and you use the carpet to fill the gaps because the carpet was just loose. So it wasn't stuck down. So when it pushed in, the spots where there were gaps, the carpet would just be loose. You're going to look at Mark laughing because he's like, yep, I remember those days. They were so bad. And there were guys that I saw doing that stuff well into like 2000s because they never took the journey to try to make some of those pieces where you would make the outer ring and then make the inner ring and gap them.
Wow. Fun fact.
So dating ourselves.
Yeah. Well, Elias was still in diapers when we started learning that stuff.
Exactly.
So
since we're on the Top Gun subject, we can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, that was definitely a staple for Rockford and for the dealers because it was a big deal to get invited to that.
Oh yeah.
Us in the training department, we were just given the list. The sales managers would work with the rep firms to get who was coming. But it was definitely an elite group that got invited to those things, and it was a 4-day program. And Rockford, they did it right back then. They paid for the airline tickets, they put them up in hotels. It was a first class thing really for that era of time.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I remember I worked for Audio Express, and for us, it was a contest to be able to go. We had to win a contest within the
Yep.
company, and I got to go with another guy from the Phoenix area. So I flew out there and we went together, and yeah, that was one of those career changing moments. Was 4 days at Rockford.
Yeah. So that program was, obviously super successful, not only for Rockford, but I think the industry in general. Because it didn't just help Rockford. Those installers went back and they used those techniques to install Orion or whatever other brand as well.
Yeah.
And those installers would leave the Rockford dealer and they would be at a competitor dealer, so I think it really, if there's one thing that I could say that I contributed or I'm proud of looking back is that, I think we were very instrumental in building, a lot better installer. And it's still shown today for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, things have changed, but, a lot of those techniques are still around today.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, but the Top Gun, in the beginning, probably for the first 10 years, now that I think back, I think the first year we took it on the road internationally was 1993 was the first international trip I'd ever made. And they flew me to Japan to do Top Gun programs.
Wow.
So, but through that journey, I mean, I think at one point I had counted and looked at passports and tried to keep track of where I had been. I'm pretty sure the number is around 50 different countries.
Wow.
That we did those trainings in.
Wow.
So, not only was it a domestic thing, it was definitely an international thing for a lot of years.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So, and the amount of students, I couldn't even begin to tell you, a lot.
Oh, tens of thousands, I'm sure.
So,
yeah.
And Brian, like you mentioned, it was, it's not only the first person to learn, a lot of those guys learn from that guy who came to the shop, and the trickle down effect.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know I learned through the years, I've learned several things from other installers that have been to RTTI or, Top Gun or other training classes from manufacturers throughout the years of the 90s for sure.
Yeah, most definitely.
I know Elias has a couple of questions and I do as well. My other question I want to ask you, or my next question is, what is your favorite event or thing or time of the industry? Like through all the years of, you, like you said, you really started in like 83 all the way till, retiring from Rockford. What was your favorite thing about the industry?
Really, two things would come to mind. First thing that I would say would be all of the IASCA finals. And, I judged at quite a few of those. Yeah. But what was always so exciting and rewarding about those events for me was to see installers I had trained and how they had implemented techniques and improved on techniques. So that was always super exciting to see the vehicles that, basically came out of those types of programs. So every year that was always exciting to see, what the next level, how, because they, everyone took the techniques that we taught and used them in different ways. And that's
right.
I taught a lot of people, but that was just the beginning. It's how everyone else has used those techniques in, different ways. So the finals were always, super rewarding to me for that.
I have to
Probably
agree.
my other.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the other thing that would always, stand out in my mind was the CES show, because every year we built the factory demo cars. So it was always exciting to unveil the car, because from the time that I started at Rockford, basically I built one car a year, and we usually built that in a 6 or 8 week time frame. I mean, we were never given a ton of time. So that was always exciting, that first day of the show, to showcase the vehicle we had built for Rockford.
Awesome.
So
I always look forward to all the demo cars at finals and shows like that. And like you said, IASCA, for the guys that weren't around in the 90s, IASCA drove innovation for manufacturers. I mean, countless times that I can think of that guys would do something, or back then, we had a lot of guys that were sponsored, and that sponsorship was a lot more involved with the competitor and the manufacturer. There was a lot of communication back and forth. And I know with you guys and with like Kicker and MB Court and, all these other companies, there was a lot of ideas that came from competitors and the teams building those vehicles to develop products that became off-the-shelf products.
Most definitely.
And now, it's almost a shame that we don't have that anymore, because now it's all marketing driven and stuff like that. Or, well, I guess some of it is marketing driven nowadays, but the early 2000s definitely were a marketing driven thing for the industry, where competition didn't have the same effect. So yeah, all those years of IASCA finals, nights and days and sleepless weeks and everything getting there, but it's almost like Knowledge Fest nowadays for us or any kind of industry event like that. It's the effort much, but the reward at the shows is so worthwhile.
No, I mean, you're spot on that. I mean, so many of the, products that were developed in the 90s were because of the competitors.
Yeah.
Or improved, to address the competitors' needs.
Yeah. Which in the end had a great impact on the retail side of things for stores.
Yeah.
I
remember one of my favorite products from Rockford was trying to think what it was called. It was punch speakers, but they were the sound cue based, like mid-bass drivers and stuff. The series escapes me now, but I just remember when that's
audiophile.
That's it. The punch audiophile, 100%. I remember a buddy of mine who I'm still friends with to this day. He was putting that stuff in his Celica, and man, I remember putting that stuff in that vehicle, and it sounded so good. So good. I loved it. It's one of my favorite series of speakers through the years.
So I just want to back up real quick before our next question. We talked a lot about Top Gun, and we talked a lot about Mark Lowe, but I wasn't the only one. I ran that thing, but I had a lot of good guys that worked for me through those years, and they deserve recognition on that as much as I do. I mean, I drove that bus, but there were a lot of guys that were involved in that. Rick Jones, who ultimately built the vehicles for Alma Gates. When he left Rockford, he was at Precision. Obviously Brian Schmidt, Brian is, both of those guys I hired in from retail stores. Rick worked at Quality Auto Sound in Denver. I relocated him to Arizona. The next person I hired after that was Brian. So Brian was at a shop in Ogden, Utah, or a little area. I forget the exact town, but so I hired him in. So there are a lot of guys like that that were involved through the years also.
Well, we've talked to guys over the last few weeks about, the idea, we have our kind of circle that Elias and I, we throw ideas at. Hey, this is something we're looking at. What do you guys think? Da, da, da. And, when we talked about this, they were like, oh, this is a great idea for this new series. And then we brought up your name, and it's been mentioned more than once that without Mark Lowe, there may never have been a Mobile Solutions or Brian Schmidt as we know him today. And that guy has contributed, and we already know he's going to be one of the invitees to our show. But what he brought from RTTI to RTTI on the road, which that's where I first met him, I was in Denver at Car Toys, and we did a training with him. I still remember building this little center console thing that was about this big. And that was the RTTI on the road thing. And there are so many guys, Mark Fukuda, and, all these other guys from the Top Gun program that have shaped other parts of the industry. So they're all there. And, any of us that remember those days, we know who they are.
Well, it was, like I said, just super blessed I was part of that. And so happy for what I contributed, but I'm so blessed that I was given that opportunity.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Rockford, none of that would have happened. There were guys every bit as good as me and probably better at the time, but I was given the opportunity by Rockford, and, I really took it and ran, and, it really worked out. And I guess that was probably part of the reason why I'm the way I am about the industry is, I was given that opportunity, and I felt that everyone else should be given the opportunity.
For sure.
So
that's a great way to look at it, man.
100%. I was going to touch on something. If I recall correctly, if memory serves me correctly, CES was also not just a big build, but wasn't it also new product debut for in conjunction with, the build?
Most definitely. I mean, the demo cars, generally speaking, would have all the new product. And back in that era, definitely today products introduced whenever products introduced.
Right.
There's no rhyme or reason per se. Still, some companies still base it off of trade shows or events, but it's not only that. Where back, in the CES days, that was the only time that new products were released. And generally speaking, to your point, those would be debuted in the demo cars.
That's exciting.
So, which was good and bad, because sometimes that stuff wasn't ready to be in cars. So
prototype.
We definitely had some years that it was prototype stuff, and
yeah,
our cars always looked awesome. They sometimes didn't sound that good because of that, for sure.
Right.
I remember seeing stuff in magazines, so that was always exciting for me.
No, it was again, super exciting, to debut those cars at CES. And, generally speaking, all those cars were feature cars and car audio. And, I have no idea. And just because a lot of that didn't mean that much to me. And I wish I would have saved more of that stuff and probably taken more of that in. But again, my focus wasn't on Mark Lowe. So,
right.
It was definitely on the industry and on Rockford. So, but the number of cars that we had in magazines across the world were unbelievable.
That's amazing. I remember always looking forward to the new product directories that would come out, like from Car Audio Magazine and stuff like that, just to see who was coming up with what. It was always, so much fun to see the new stuff that everybody was showing off, and then see the vehicle spotlights of the showcase vehicles from the manufacturers and different stuff like that. It was always so much fun.
Yeah.
So we saw Jared posted, I don't know if you saw it on one of the posts that we put on Facebook, that you were responsible for how much money he spent on his garage.
Well, luckily he hasn't sent me a bill.
So Elias and I were talking. We're like, okay, there's a story there. So we need the story of why did Jared feel like he needed to spend so much money on his garage?
Well, Jared doesn't live that far from my house in Arizona. So one time he had come by, and my new house, I've been in this new house about 6 years because I moved into it right after I retired. And I had built, obviously the garage that is here, but also a pretty cool wood shop. And I think for him, it was, obviously motivating when he came, and it was organized and, built out pretty nice. So, that would be another thing that, on that topic, I would say that, I feel I've carved in the industry are the shops, because, Rockford always had the best shops out of any manufacturer. And so that's always been something that, has been a lot to me. And I've always focused on making sure that our facilities were top notch. So, and a lot of time done, most of the time done on a budget, because, I think people would come and think, oh, they have the unlimited budget. Of course they have this stuff. But a lot of that stuff that we had, whether it was Rick or Brian or whoever was there at the time, a lot of that stuff we built, we built it all, but a lot of it we did on our own time, just, so that we had, because it meant a lot to us to bring, the Rockford shop was always like a focal point of a tour, whether it was a dealer or a magazine or whoever it was, an investor, it didn't matter. Everyone always came through the RTTI shop, and it was, always super clean and organized. And, and I think that has trickled down, even to today. I mean, a lot of times I'll look at pictures and I'd be like, yeah, I can see where some of those ideas came from. So it's, again, rewarding for me to see that effect.
So the follow-up to that is, can you get him to spend more?
I guess I need to get him back over here to see some of the new updates.
There you go.
And,
just go over and visit and be like, it looks like you need whatever, and let's see how long it takes him to get something new.
Yeah. Well, he outfitted his garage really nice, so.
Yeah, he does have a nice shop.
We saw pictures, yeah. So I have a question for you, Mark. What has been your favorite tip or trick to share with people you've trained over the years? What is like the one go-to that you always preach? And,
well, I would probably have to break that into a couple.
Okay.
Because it was kind of by time frame. In the early days, 100% the router table and a flush trim bit. I've been preaching a router table and a flush trim bit since the first 1991 Top Gun class. If there's going to be a lot of people that they don't remember anything about me other than that. So that, if there was one thing it would definitely be that, you know.
Yeah.
But I think off that, you know, that created a lot of, you know, other techniques and stuff spun off of that, you know, whether it was stack fabrication, you know, by, you know, which obviously you see all the time today, but that was something, you know, we were showing in the early 90s. So I think that's super cool to still see that technique being used. And then, you know, as it evolved later on and I was more in the product development era at Rockford, and, you know, a lot of people who came through from Brian's classes, you know, because we were next door to Brian. So he always brought classes over for a tour of Rockford. You know, I think we were, you know, definitely way ahead of people on 3D scanning. You know, we were showing the Creoform scanner before it was being used in car audio by anybody. And also a lot of the 3D CNC techniques where, you know, we were, you know, doing complete pieces on the CNC early on. So those would be a couple of tips and tricks. And again, I think that's, you know, again, when I see so much of the new stuff and people's, you know, saying, oh, I've learned 3D scanning, I've learned CAD, 3D modeling, you know, I've been using SolidWorks since the early 90s. So to see that be so well used so much today, the different, you know, modeling programs, and to, you know, see people 3D scanning, that's super cool. Because I would have to say, you know, for a lot of the guys that came to Mobile Solutions, when we would show the 3D scanning, I think that's the first time they'd ever seen that in use.
Mm-hmm.
So
I gotta say that the tip I remember the most, the fence around, like, so the way that you guys would teach, you know, strip to make like rectangular thin cutouts and stuff like that.
No, but I think that, and I would have to agree with you on that was a technique. Again, that came when I talked about the door ring or things like that, you know, building a faceplate for a DIN radio, you know, guys today, it's so much, they don't understand that as much, but we always had to build a trim plate, whether it was for a radio or for an amplifier, and coming up with that technique with the fence and the pieces of wood going around it, that definitely, you know, that ultimately went into the Fukuda jig.
Right.
You know, that, you know, he built a better mousetrap.
Yeah.
You know, but it's based on that concept.
You know, and the funny thing is I remember staring at that Fukuda jig so many times, you know, and it's one of the few tools I never bought, but still to this day, I use strips of wood and, you know, or at this point I have pieces of plastic that I've cut and made my own pieces to just reuse them over and over and over, you know. But yeah, that was one of my favorite things to learn.
No, from probably one of the simplest things to implement, you know, that was a huge one. And I guess I kind of overlooked that, but that was always one of my favorite ones to show people, because that was kind of like the jigsaw challenge. Because we would talk about faceplates and ask the guys, you know, well, how do you make your ABS faceplate? And everyone had some sort of way. They were a master with a razor knife or whatever it was instead of a jigsaw. And
4 holes in a jigsaw. That was my technique.
Yeah.
And the fence changed my life.
Well,
yeah,
that's
for sure.
That's great to hear.
So flush trim and router bit was the first one, and probably the more blasted, you would say, at your trainings.
For sure.
Yeah.
Which we look at it. I don't know. We look at it today, and you know, there's multiple companies that they live on selling just that. and template tape. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Templates and flush trim bits. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to ask this one, and I don't know if there's really an answer for this. But curious to what you think was your biggest contribution to our industry.
I think if I would, say what I would feel my biggest contribution was trying to bring the industry together, the installers, and be able to learn from each other and not have everything be secrets. I think I was instrumental in trying to open that up. And, I remember a lot of people telling me back in the day, I can't believe, one thing that people would always say in classes is, well, show us the other stuff. Show us, how, and, I would always say that's everything. We're not saving anything back. We're willing to share everything that we know. And, I think the other thing was, we were always open to hear what other people had to say, because we weren't we never felt we were like the experts,
Right.
We would always say, when you think you know everything, that's as good as you're ever going to be.
Yeah.
100%.
It's funny that you say that, because through my years, I will say that at some point I lost sight of that based on just companies that I worked for, and like working for certain places where you were competing against the guys in the bay next to you for work. And there's a story I will share. Elias used to work with Matt Schaefer, and Matt was out showing all these videos and classes on how to do cool stuff with carbon fiber overlays and stuff. And he and I were talking one time, and I asked him, why do you show all of this? Why are you showing all the work? And he brought me back to something that I had to remember and think about. Was there's 3 parts to every project. There's the skill, or sorry, the knowledge, the time, and the tools. And most people are never going to invest in all 3. They might learn how to do it by watching all these videos and stuff, and they might buy the tools, but they're never going to commit the time. Or they have the time and they have the knowledge, but they won't invest in the tools. And he says, so show all of it, because there's only a small amount of people that are ever going to make the full circle. And that goes back to Top Gun, and what you guys taught is share it all, because at the end, going back to the shop after being at Top Gun, nobody else knew what we were doing. No, like what we were able to do coming back, you ran into a lot of situations, like you said, where owners might not be willing to invest in tools. I had to go buy my own router. Nobody was buying me a router at the shop I worked at. We were barely lucky if we had a table saw in most of the shops. So I had to go buy my own router and my own trash can, and I used a piece of leftover wood. But then further along, it was just one of those things where it's like, there's no point in hiding all of this, for the same reason that let's get everybody there, or try to get the knowledge out there that people can just do it. And then it's up to them whether or not they do. So the fact that that's the philosophy that fueled your desire to train so many people, I sat back after that conversation with Matt wishing I would have thought that way for a lot longer than I did, or hadn't lost it so far back. You know what I mean?
Because it's like you said, it still comes down to the creative side of it. You can know all the techniques, but it doesn't mean that you can build something good.
Yeah.
Or you can't build something as good as someone else. in the bay next to you or whatever. The techniques that's just something in the toolbox.
Yeah. That's the absolute truth, man. It's the mental toolbox was always the biggest thing for any of us to have. You know, I could buy tools all day long, and if I didn't know how to use them or couldn't come up with a way to use them, then they were pointless to have.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mark, I can't tell you how thankful I am you were happy to come on the show with us, our inaugural show of the Industry Icons, man. This is going to be a fun one to get edited and get ready to go out. I'm so excited to get this on YouTube and hopefully get a lot of people to watch.
Well, that's awesome. You know, like I mentioned, it was an honor that you guys thought of me. Feel super blessed that, you know, I was part of the industry for all those years. And, you know, like I said, you know, I never made it about me. And that's why, you know, I think, you know, some people know who I am. A lot of people don't. A lot of them, you know, most of them know me indirectly, whether they know my name or not. But for me, that's the best, because you know, it wasn't about me. It was about the industry and trying to build a better industry for, you know, that era and the next one. And so,
well,
I was, you know,
I think Elias
kind of referred to my, you know, I was kind of the guy in the background.
Yeah. I think Elias will agree with me when I say that I think your legacy will live on even when people don't know it's you.
Well,
the things you've brought to our industry, the people that you've influenced in our industry that have gone on to create other things for our industry because of you. Yeah, your legacy lives on for a long time.
Well, I appreciate hearing that.
I think for me, and you know, I'll start off by saying thank you for, you know, coming on and, you know, chatting car audio and letting us know more about you and your journey. But I think for me, the biggest takeaway resonates with me, you know, on a personal level, because for me, I enjoy giving back. And, you know, from, you know, the most minimal tip or trick to taking the time to, you know, helping, you know, my retailers in a much more in-depth sense, or whether it's an individual at a trade show or whatever it is, I enjoy giving back. And something you said earlier about, you know, being able to do for people to, you know, make them better and bring everyone closer together, that resonates with me. You know, that's what I'm about. You know, Brian knows, you know, since we do these podcast recordings, since we started, it was all within, you know, a purpose of being able to give back to the industry, even if it's a small little nugget, you know, even if, you know, it's a couple recordings, who knows how many, you know, we'll have total, you know, months, years from now.
Right.
But the whole reason why we do this, because we care, we have passion for it, and we want to give back. And, you know, it's awesome to share that, you know, mutual feeling with you. So thank you.
Well, that's, you know, that's awesome. That's, you know, that attitude, and, you know, that I think that, you know, has helped grow the industry and continues to.
Yep.
You know, it's definitely exciting to see how, looking at it now, you know, that people are a lot more willing to help each other. And, you know, whether it's through a paid class or whether it's through, you know, just helping, like you said, somebody to show or whatever, it's, you know, it's different than it used to be. And I hope my influence was, you know, carve some of that.
And the you know, even wilder part of it is you never know who you're going to influence and how impactful it's going to be, you know. Like I always think about, you know, interactions with, you know, industry peers, and they walk up to you like, hey, you said this on this, you know, Facebook Live, or you told me this, and I, you know, implemented into my store, or whatever it is, you know. It's always crazy and jaw dropping to get that feedback, you know. And I remember when Brian used to do his Facebook lives and he was sharing all his tips and tricks. You know, you would read the comments in real time. Oh my God, I've never done it this way, or I'm going to try that. You know, things like that. You know, it all adds up, and you know, it's honestly what I'm all about nowadays. You know, giving back. You know, all the individual accomplishments, those have a near and dear place for me. But my bigger, fist bumping moments are helping others, and I love it. You know,
No, that's to me that it was always way more satisfying helping others than just achieving on my own.
yep.
Yeah. I think seeing all of those people succeed that, that you trained, or, like Elias said, when we would do our live videos and people would comment, oh, that's a great way to do that. Or, oh, how did you do that? And, I'd get messages on Facebook or emails or whatever, and people asking me questions, and I would just tell them, well, I do this, or this is the trick I use, or we would show tools or whatever, and people would just be, oh, wow. And to see them go on and do things and have that experience of knowing that this little piece of information helped them get somewhere further, that's everything. When we do these podcasts, just a little bit of information, just getting to, like, what I'm hoping people see from this is the people that helped make the industry what it is today, so that they can have an appreciation for those who put in the work to
I think you got a little frozen for a second.
Yeah, I think we froze up for a second. Everybody's good now?
Yep.
Well, Mark, I appreciate it again, and I hope our podcasts go well. But I'm already spawning ideas of, like you mentioned, all the guys that you brought into Top Gun. Maybe there's an episode down the road where we all get to share, and we can bring a group of you guys in and have some reminiscing about all the days of.
Well, I really appreciate you guys, that the effort that you put into doing this for the industry, and, your time and effort on it. And again, just super honored that, you guys reached out to me and felt that I was worthy of being on this. So I'm super blessed, and I appreciate that.
Well, we're blessed to have had you as part of our industry for 30 some years.
So.
All right, sir. Well, you have a great day.
So,
go ahead.
No, obviously you're editing this part off, but just what do I need to do at the end?
Give us a second and we'll finish up, and then I'll come back, and we're going to pull you out of the room for a minute, and then I'll bring you back in and we'll finish. Hang on. Anyway, Mark, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Mark.
Holy cow.
A lot of awesomeness there, a lot of motivational influence there. It's kind of like what I said earlier, me being a humble person, giving back means a lot. It's so rewarding. And, sharing that, vibe with Mark, is on a personal level. That's awesome.
That gives you something to just kind of continue to aspire to, right? To be humble like that about what you do for the industry. And again, like you said, it was never about him. And this is not about us. This is what we can share. And 100%. I hope we get to keep doing more of this. So, all right, man, I'm going to let you go. I know we both got things we need to get to. And I look forward to the next one.
We'll see everyone soon.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us on the very first episode of Where Are They Now? The Industry Icons.